I think one of the hardest things that you can do as a home cook is to make your own bread. So in today's recipe, we're going to be attempting to make a Japanese milk bread. And from that bread, we're going to be making fruit sandwiches. And since this is Aspire Fitness, we're going to be putting them into bento boxes and meal prepping them for the week. So let's get cooking up, guys. I wanted to try something different this week and show you guys the mistakes that we made when making bread and how you guys can avoid them in order to be successful on your first try. We tried 4 different recipes that we found on YouTube, and we gotta say the winner definitely goes to Magic Ingredients, as the recipe resulted in everything you need for a perfectly made milk bread. So the ingredient list will be down in the description below, so make sure you get everything before you start this recipe. We're gonna be starting it off with 400 grams of all-purpose flour. We got 2 grams of salt and 2 heaping tablespoons of sugar. We got 1 packet of active dry yeast, 2 tablespoons of butter, 83 grams of warm water, 167 grams of warm milk, 2 tablespoons of oil. We got 2 eggs to finish, and we didn't film it here, but you want to also have 1 pint of heavy cream, 3 tablespoons of monk fruit sweetener, and whatever fruits you'd like to be in your sandwich. So let's start off the first batch of bread we made that was a total fail. We actually filmed like 4 different loads before we got it down, so this definitely took a ton of effort on our part. Respect to all the bakers out there. This recipe we used had some major problems in it, such as hydration and over-kneading, which resulted in something that looked more like cornbread rather than Japanese milk bread. Although the flavor was delicious, the texture was pretty dry and cornbread-like. So make sure that your dough looks wet enough and then you knead it until it just comes together. Kneading too much causes the gluten to tense up, which results in a rock-hard loaf. A good rule of thumb here is if the dough feels thick, then the loaf will be thick. You want to aim for a light and sticky dough. We used the first recipe one more time until we realized that it just wasn't going to work like we wanted it to. We found Magic Ingredients recipe, but we still made some mistakes which resulted in another tough loaf of bread. The first mistake we made was using dead yeast. We didn't check the expiration date on the yeast, and we didn't check to see if it was still alive. We went out and bought new yeast and it finally rose. However, I had to go to work, so I left it out for way too long and it overproofed the dough. This made the loaf flatten out, and once again we had a sad loaf that just didn't look right. You can fix overproof dough by reshaping it and reproofing it, but we didn't know it at the time when we just baked it anyways. We didn't give up though, we did our research and the 4th round did the trick. So now let's get started with the recipe that worked for us. Into a bowl, let's put in 400 grams of all-purpose flour, 2 grams of salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and mix it with 83 grams of warm to hot water. Now you just want to mix it up until a rough dough forms. Now we're going to get 167 ml of warm milk and add in 1 packet of yeast. Check to see if it's alive by seeing the foam form and pour it back into the flour mixture. Cover with some plastic wrap and let it rest for 20 minutes. If you don't put the plastic wrap, then a skin will form, which will prevent the dough to rise. This is a pretty crucial step to getting fluffy bread. After resting for 20 minutes, let's add in 2 tablespoons of oil and knead it for 5 minutes and no more. Overkneading results in really tough bread, as you saw in the earlier parts of this video. Let it sit in a warm place and allow it to rise for an hour or until it doubles in size. Don't leave it out for too long or it will start to deflate. Don't make the same mistakes we did and do this like 4 times. There's nothing worse than trying to make fluffy, delicious, milky Japanese bread and getting cornbread instead. It really sucks, guys. Now let's sprinkle a tiny bit of flour and take it out of the bowl. Divide it into 3 equal parts and use this genius method by Emmy made, where she rolls out the dough into these little cigars. She explains it better, but you essentially just want to roll it up lengthwise and then roll it up very loosely, as we don't want to overknead in this stage. The less you knead, the fluffier the bread. Place the 3 into a loaf pan and set aside for 1 more hour or until the dough reaches to the top of the pan. After that, it's pretty simple. We just want to bake it in the oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. You can brush the top with butter before putting it in, but we wanted to save on the calories. And there you go, you get this super fluffy milk bread that you really can't get anywhere else. Making bread at home is way better than getting it anywhere else, since it's so fresh and nothing beats that feeling of having it come out perfectly right out of the oven. You ideally want to wait an hour or 2 to let this cool completely, since the texture will stay fluffy, but we had to cut it open right away for that YouTube shot. Honestly, the texture was perfect, so if you're like us and want milky bread right away, just go for it. Now let's just slice this into pretty thick cuts, since we're going to be making sandwiches out of this. Since the bread is so fluffy, you want to make sure they're pretty thick, as it'll be really hard to keep anything in there from just flopping over. We decided to make cream-filled fruit sandwiches, since that was one of my favorite things I had when I went to Japan. For the cream, let's just add in a pint of heavy cream and whip it up until stiff peaks form. We use monk fruit sweetener so we can keep the sugars lower in this recipe, but you'll still be getting some from the fruits in the sandwich. Make sure to add the monk fruit sweetener when you're almost at stiff peaks, or you won't be able to get that super fluffy whipped cream. After the cream is turned foamy, let's get to assembling our sandwiches. So the sandwiches are pretty simple. You just want to go bread, cream, fruit, cream, and bread. Make sure not to skimp out on the cream. It'll make it look better when there's more, and it just gives it a nice contrast of colors. There's 2 ways you can lay out the fruit. You can think of it as cutting it in half directly in the middle, or laying them out diagonally for that triangle cut sandwich. Just think about the direction you're cutting in, and you can kind of imagine how it will come out. It's kind of hard to explain, so just look at what we're doing when we cut the sandwiches open. After you assemble the sandwich, make sure you put it in some plastic wrap it tight, and let it rest in the fridge for 20 minutes. After resting, the cream should have thickened up, which will make cutting them into perfect shapes much easier. Now let's get into the hard part. Japanese fruit sandwiches don't have any crust, so you have to have a really sharp knife to cut off all the ends here. Since the cream is thickened up, this actually shouldn't be too hard, but you still have to make sure you cut pretty delicately or everything will spill out and you're going to be super angry and contemplate destroying your kitchen and quitting YouTube and never making another video again. But thankfully that didn't happen here. I would have seriously punched a wall or something. You can cut the sandwich in the middle or you can go lengthwise depending on how you positioned it. Some common sense is required here, so just imagine what the cross section will look like and you'll be good to go. We put these in the bento boxes since this is Aspire Fitness and we love prepping things for the week. These are great for picnics or for your kids if they're struggling to get their fruits in. We'll have the nutrition facts listed for you in the description below, so make sure you check it out after you've made these. This was honestly such a fun video to make, and it's definitely the most challenging thing that we've ever made on this channel. I hope you guys can learn from our mistakes and try out this awesome Japanese milk bread recipe. It was seriously so good, guys. Anyways, if you're looking for more healthy recipes that we haven't featured on the channel, then you can check out our cookbook where we also go over how to set up your own meal plan for weight loss. Feel free to like and subscribe if you liked the video, and please leave the suggestions for any topics you guys would like to see. We're having such a good time making these videos, and we're so glad that you guys are here to watch. Hope to see you guys in the next one, and I wish you guys luck in your Japanese milk bread journey.